Five Nights at Freddy's has had a lot of theories, some that are no longer true. So out of all the past series, what is the worst one? What is the most hated one? A lot of theories go under the radar, but as we're about to cover, some start controversy, especially through TikTok, creating a situation full of misinformation. Also, this video has a very special guest who brought a very controversial Fnaf theory, and you don't want to miss out. There's probably a good chance you haven't even heard of some of these, but maybe you've heard of this one. I'm talking about a theory that resurfaced on TikTok where Bonnie broke William Afton's jaw. My name's Arcade, and this is Theory Review. So for context, this theory explains that the kid that became Bonnie, Jeremy, went down fighting, and this is why he's the most aggressive one in the game, and that is all the evidence. But it was definitely enough to start some heated arguments. I feel like due to the limited information about the characters in FNAF, people are forced to fill in the blanks. And while that could lead to theorizing and whole careers like MatPat from game theory, it could also lead to people making stuff up because it's fun. It's more of a headcanon, really, leading to some misinformation that felt like a Mandela effect for people saying that there's actually proof in the books when there isn't. I haven't read the novels yet, so feel free to correct me in the comments. The thing is, this also goes for every other animatronic. There is some variation of people saying that Bonnie went down fighting, Foxy ran away, Freddy was hiding, and Chica was screaming, and like, there is very little proof to go with that. I'm pretty sure as a kid, if you see a man in a yellow rabbit chasing you with a knife, you're probably going to run, hide, fight, and then scream in that order, realistically. But people on TikTok seem to be convinced that Bonnie threw hands and managed to break William Afton's jaw, which is wild, especially because he was wearing the suit. And it's hard to blame people for believing this, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. For one, there are hardly any character descriptions for animatronics. What I mean by this is that, like, personality traits, if that makes sense. Obviously there are some that are implied, like with William Afton being this cold, calculating figure and a neglectful parent, born out of the context clues of the confirmed story plots. But for other characters, it's a bit more difficult. It's hard to remember that these animatronics are kids, especially after a while playing the game or even theorizing. They start to become as robotic as the characters they possessed. Like, they are still kids with their own personalities. It makes sense for people to want to give them characters and character traits because most of what we know for sure is about what happened to them as opposed to what they think about it. For being a big part of the game, it would be hard to describe them beyond their physical features, but the other reason for people believing this is due to people claiming headcanons as fact. I noticed this when it first blew up on TikTok, but when I started researching for this video, quite a few people were bothered by how much traction it got for relying on so little. Enough people know that it really is just a fun interpretation and it isn't canon, but a shocking amount just accepted it as fact. I like these ideas to an extent, I'll clarify here in a bit, but I do agree that it humanizes the characters in the game. Also, it's just funny for Bonnie, but the reason I put it on the list, other than people not liking it, is because it really isn't a theory. I know FNAF lore is hard to decipher, but there has to be a line where you can't just make stuff up and force it to make sense. You could do that with anything. Like I could say, well actually the girl who possessed Chica had a pet rabbit that possessed the cupcake, which would explain why it's also alive. Like you can't just make silly headcanons as fact. And since it got so popular, it sparked some controversy with people arguing over the evidence in Silver Eyes. I want to clarify too, this theory or some variation of it existed way back, even before TikTok. It only resurfaced due to TikTok around the movie's release, which is where I heard it from. I like the intent behind it, but not so much the theory. I can see why people don't like it. I give this theory 1 Freddy Fazbear's. Come on TikTok, do better. Before we do get to our special guest, I want to quickly cover a theory that's sort of in the same train of thought as the last one, which is that actually Foxy in FNAF 1 is a good guy, and that when he jump scares you, he's actually just checking in on you. Bro, running up like that is not how you check in on somebody. Again, this is an older theory. I guess people were just starving for content in the early days. But how do you see this as being friendly? This is ridiculous, almost to the point of being funny, except no one's laughing. I give it half of Freddy Fazbear's. For this video, I had to do some research, and that meant reaching out to Five Nights at Freddy's YouTubers and theorists. I am new to the FNAF lore scene, and I wanted to get the best and most reliable information for people who have been making videos and theories for a while now. You might know him from solving the one retcon in FNAF. Introducing WitheredCircle. Can you give a quick summary for the people who don't know what Fright Fiction is, just real quick?
Okay, so basically Fright Fiction is the theory that the Fazbear Frights, specifically Fazbear Frights, that those series of books those novellas are all written in-universe by Fazbear Entertainment. So it's not that they happen in-universe, it's that Fazbear Entertainment, the company, wrote those books to spread misinformation in-universe. It's weird.
I know you covered a lot more in depth in your debunk video. What do you think was the biggest evidence against the theory?
So the thing about Fright Fiction is that there's like no evidence for it, which means there's also no evidence against it. But the biggest point against Fright Fiction, in my opinion, is that there's no evidence for Fright Fiction, and it kind of goes against what Help Wanted's twist was trying to do when it introduced the in-universe video games.
Well, what do you think made the theory controversial? Would you even say it's a controversial theory?
It's been around for a while. I know that Squawks made a video on it like a year and a half ago, but it's been around before that for years. And it's always been controversial because not many people believe it outside of Fnaf YouTube, which I find very interesting. I don't know why, but Fnaf YouTube in particular seems to be very attracted to the theory. A lot of people seem to believe it for some reason, which is why this video got a lot of negative attention in the comments, to put it lightly.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that. Is there anything you feel like people missed in the video that you want to like clarify or anything?
I mean, I don't know. I sort of just put it all there, but I feel like I have to make it extra clear again that just because I don't have direct evidence to, like, so in the title I'm like, oh, I debunked it, which
Right.
That video was not a debunk video. It's like my thoughts on it and why I think it's not true. You don't need evidence against it for something to not be true. And I think it's the fact that there's no evidence for Fright Fiction that is its main problem. And I wanted to make that extra clear.
What prompted you to like make the video?
So I've been thinking about it for a while, and I had it like planned for a while. But I recently, for that Retcon video that you brought up, I did a collab with Gibby's Horror Homestead, and he is a pretty strong believer in Fright Fiction. And so I had that script like in the back burner for a while, but kind of because of that, it motivated me to get it done that particular week.
You did say that is popular on FNAF YouTube, but not necessarily outside of it. Why do you think that? I didn't know that. What do you think that is?
This is like interesting because the main three spheres, I feel like, is like FNAF YouTube, FNAF Twitter, and FNAF Reddit.
Right.
FNAF YouTube goes with whatever the most popular people are saying. FNAF Reddit is kind of like schizo theories. And FNAF Twitter just listen to their own thing and never listen to anyone else. So they all have like their own dynamic, and I find it really funny. And I feel like with Gibby kind of strongly promoting Fright Fiction and the idea circulating with Squawks, like I brought up earlier, people sort of just latched onto it for some reason. And I haven't seen Reddit or Twitter hold on to that idea so strongly. I don't know why. I can't tell you why, but it's definitely something worth thinking about.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was, because I only just recently heard about this theory. Honestly, I'm only now getting into the lore space. Would you say that that's a good thing that the FNAF YouTube only covers popular stuff, or is it just how it goes?
I don't know. It's kind of complicated. I wish FNAF YouTube became less like focused on specific people and more open to things in general and to their own ideas. I feel like a lot of people don't critically think as much as on other FNAF theorizing spaces. But, you know, I can't change anything about that, so it's okay.
Right. Do you think that YouTube is what's keeping it alive? Like FNAF YouTube, that theory space is keeping this theory alive? Is it not as popular on other platforms like you mentioned?
I mean, on Twitter, I don't think I have never encountered anyone who believes it. Reddit, some people. I think it's YouTube that's keeping it alive. Specifically Gibby. Gibby's definitely been doing a lot of work pushing this theory out there. No hate to Gibby, by the way. Gibby's really cool. Just a theory that we disagree with, and that's fine. Like I said.
Yeah, I think it's fine to like hate on the theories, not necessarily the people themselves. It keeps it all friendly. Thank you so much for like taking the time out of your day. Do you want to plug your stuff, where can people find your videos and your channels and whatnot?
Sure. Channel's WitheredCircle. I put videos there like every week for now. And yeah, I do FNAF theories, and that's pretty much where you can find me in everything I do.
If you have your own theory that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. Everyone has their favorites, or in this case, least favorite. It might even be this next one. So make sure to subscribe and comment your least favorite FNAF theory. Now for our last theory, it's actually a very infamous one a lot of people hate. Probably the most hated theory, to the point where even Scott was confused. The Dream Theory. The Dream Theory exists in every TV show, game, book, comic, whatever, but there's an annoying amount of details that people use as evidence for this Fnaf theory. The dreamer in this case is the crying child, and we actually talked about something similar in the last video with FNAF World Story, but the difference is that other theory is about the crying child coming to terms with passing on, and this one is just lazy. This theory claims that the first 4 games are all part of the crying child's dreams, and that the other kids the child meets are the animatronics in this dream. Like this one girl being Chica because the arms are out. People also have his brother jump scaring him with the Foxy mask to explain the Foxy jump scares. Even the phone and the fan in the first game are explained by being in his room in the FNAF 4. This theory is basically saying that everything is all just a dream because the crying child is in a coma. Now, this part is pretty common. People do believe that FNAF 4 we play as a child who is in the hospital, with details like the IV bag on the side of the bed. But the difference is that the dream theory stops there entirely and everything else is in his head. This is incredibly reductive to the whole narrative, and a lot of people, including myself, dislike this theory for a few reasons. For one, it is debunked, and there's even a joke about it in the movie. Scott confirmed that nobody has solved the story of FNAF 4, even after MatPat came out with this dream theory, which is pretty definitive. The reason I think people hate this theory is because dream theories are very unsatisfying narratively. You have an interesting premise, there's clues that lead to a bigger story, but then it suddenly doesn't matter because any inconsistencies are all just part of a dream where things don't have to make sense. It removes the horror aspect entirely because you wake up from the nightmares eventually. It removes character motivation too because all the characters are just figments of your imagination. And by doing so, it removes the plot. Instead, it's just, oh, this child had an accident and that's basically it. And it's not like there's no evidence for it, it just makes a horrible story, reducing the stakes and events to nothing mattering. I do like how instead of people taking FNAF 4 at face value, they have used details like the hospital room implications to assist in larger timelines, and even saying the nightmare animatronics aren't real. But to take it too many steps forward is lazy writing. It removes the nuance in the story to have it all be made up, and because of this, it is one of the most hated theories, and maybe one of the more popular dream theories. Like I mentioned before, dream theories aren't exactly uncommon, such as The Walking Dead all just being Rick in a coma imagining his doctors and nurses as other survivors, or even Breaking Bad being the students making up Mr. White's backstory or what he does outside of school. But those other theories are generally laughed off, and whether due to the evidence in Five Nights at Freddy's or the online theory space, this one has more credibility than those other ones. But it's still bad. 2 Freddy Fazbears. This one is easily the most twisted one of all. You guys have sent me the worst theory ever. This is one of the ones you guys recommended to me whenever we had first talked about the worst theories of Five Nights at Freddy's. A lot of you were mentioning this, and I thought it was a joke at first, okay? I thought that this was supposed to be some kind of inside joke or a meme, but no, there's some actual, this post I found with an actual fleshed out theory with quite a bit of evidence to talk about and to debunk. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself with the debunking, but there's quite a bit of evidence to talk about. And one thing I really like to do in these FNAF theory breakdowns is to talk about the storytelling aspect of it. There's not much of that here. This is very much a really sick theory in terms of it's just kind of representative of what happened in the story, just in a weird lens, if that makes sense. Easily the weirdest theory we've covered before, and it all has to do with Toy Chica. And I blame you guys. Alright, you guys are at fault for this one, because this is one that you recommended in my comment section. And today we're talking about the Toy Chica is William Afton theory. Now listen. There is way more to it than what you think, okay? I thought it was a joke at first. When people were commenting this, I thought it was just gonna be like, oh, it's just a meme, ha ha ha, funny. But no, apparently, someone made a real in-depth post about it, and it has to all do with Dittophobia. Dittophobia is one of the stories in the Tales of the Pizzaplex book series. Now, whether the books are canon or not, that's an iffy question just because it's been debated for a while. A lot of people take a look at it as it being canon in the way that, oh, like just the company, Fazbear Entertainment, made the books canon by having it be stories that they share in the in-universe. Whether or not all that is true, or if it's actual just events played out literally, that is still widely debated. That's not necessarily the discussion of this video. What we're gonna do is just assume that that is true, just for the sake of the argument, because We can try to debunk it all we can, but we need some base work. We need a baseline to work with here. Now I'm going to read out parts of the theory and then talk about it, and then talk about what makes sense, what doesn't, and just the weird implications that it has, because this is one of the weirdest side of theories in terms of what it implies story-wise. If you don't know what I'm referencing here, this is in the context of Toy Chica, the high school days, which is this random cutscene that appears in Ultimate Custom Night. It's like a Yandere parody, which is kind of funny because Yandere Simulator is also an indie game that's been worked on for around the same length as Finance of Freddy's has been, but obviously one has reached a lot of more success than the other because, you know, one game dev is actually good. Anyways, in this cutscene, it's about Toy Chica just being this kind of obsessive high school girl and targeting love interest being other boys in the classroom, representing other animatronics like Freddy. I'm not sure what the wolf ones represents. It might be a book exclusive thing. Toy Bonnie, Funtime Foxy, the puppet, and then Rory being like the pig. Anyways, in the cutscene, it implies that Toy Chica basically murders all of them, as there are pieces in her backpack left behind from each victim. Assumably, Foxy was the first one, which is why there's already a hook inside her bag at the beginning of the cutscene, and then it just starts growing over the course of the cinematic. So let's start reading out the theory. William Afton is depicted with Toy Chica. So this is the main claim that the theory is trying to propose, that Toy Chica isn't really Toy Chica in this sense. She's actually just a stand-in for William Afton, and then all her actions are what William did in order to kidnap the other children. You'll see how didophobia plays into this here in a bit. So the theory talks about how his dialogue, being Toy Chica's dialogue, reveals everything, and that the parody of Yandere genre is just kind of a front because there's deeper lore behind it. The series says this is about William Afton with his victims, with the missing children, with the children who disappeared. No, I'm not talking about the children who were murdered at Freddy's. I'm talking about the children that William Afton kidnapped for his sleep experiments. So this is where didophobia plays in. Didophobia is about a story about William Afton kidnapping children for his sleep experiments, which explains that in Fnaf 4, well, it implies that in Fnaf 4, one of the protagonists is actually one of the children, and that it's like a sleep experiment, so he's hallucinating, the protagonist is hallucinating all the nightmare animatronics. We don't really have to break down the didophobia, the story, too much, but this is what the theory is referencing, that these victims are one and the same of Toy Chica and William Afton, and that's why this represents William Afton. Which is, I know it's reaching, but hang on here, okay? The theory goes on to say, as everyone knows, William Afton kept diaries about her obsession with Henry due to the envy and admiration she had for him. It is not surprising that he wrote diaries about his victims, just as Toy Chica does in these cutscenes. I'm not sure where William Afton has been known to keep diaries. Maybe someone else can point it in the comments. I'm just gonna take the theory's word for it. There's a lot of lore to cover. I'm not surprised if he does, he looks like he would. The theory goes on to say, from what we see in Toy Chica, the high school days, William Afton kidnapped 7 children, each one attracted differently to him, and what we will see here is very interesting. Child 1 is depicted with Foxy, who is already inside Toy Chica's backpack, meaning that she already got to him before, and it didn't work out too well. The theory also points out that the last 2 are the most important, being Child 6 and Child 7, being the puppet and Rory, respectively. You're about to pick up some of the weird undertones of this theory. Don't worry, we're about to cover that, which is probably the weirdest part of this. First of all, we have to see what William Afton says about each child. At the end of each meeting with one, he says, there's only one thing that could possibly go wrong, which, yeah, I mean, I guess she does say that, but that doesn't really mean anything. Anyways, I'm going to continue to read the theory unless there's something that sticks out. Clearly, the bad thing about all this is that his prey dies during the experiments, which we know happened all 7 times due to Toy Chica's backpack. We also know the order of each child thanks to the same backpack and how it is filled little by little with each part of its victims. The class where Toy Chica plans his kidnappings, or her kidnappings, we know how this class works, and we know that it's really all about William Afton's experiments in his underground. Who is we? We don't really know that. Of course, it's implied that William Afton did do his experiments underground. He's just used to having some places that are underground, but it's not exactly confirmed this is what it's really about. Sure, biology being the actual class itself could be a good representation because biology and then also experiments with, remnant in the human body or whatever makes sense. But that's assuming way too much. There's not enough evidence to support this. Although it could work, there's just not. It's assuming that we already know this. Theory goes on to say that we don't have much information about Child 1, but beyond what, according to Chica, said, I don't think it was meant to last. William basically discarded the first subject, and no one could say that he easily accepted the fact that he died in that experiment. It's not something that William takes bad, really. And then there's a little excerpt from the book saying that William is just like, all nonchalant about his first victim not turning out all right. Kind of a sadistic man, but I mean, that's in his nature, so it makes sense. And then the theory goes on to explain how exactly William kidnapped each of the children, and the way that Chica did it is how William Afton did it in Didophobia. With Freddy, he lures him in by saying he needs help with his homework, which don't worry, we're about to cover the debunking here in a bit. With Child 3, he says, someone ran over my dog in front of the house, but once he's there, I'll just entice him with warm cookies, lure him inside, and then I'll have him. I'm really starting to notice how this theory is written out. Obviously, no hate to the people who make the theories. I want to discuss the theories themselves. That's not the point of these videos. I know I've said it before, but I feel like it's important to reiterate here that we're just discussing the theories themselves. I think it's fun to take apart and talk about theories, but not necessarily the people themselves, just because it's unnecessary. But the way this is written out, it says, this is too clear. William tricked this boy with the death of his pet to bring him home. I know it might seem like a reference to Susie, but all the examples point to these children being kidnapped by William. Beyond killed them off inside Freddy's. Child 5 was Toy Bonnie saying, I told him that my house is on fire, but once he's there, I'll tell him that I threw myself on the flames to put them out. He'll be so impressed that he'll fall for me immediately, and then I'll have him forever. This had to be a smaller child, the theory says, than the others to fall for that trick of the house on fire. Look what he says. It is possible that William tricked this child by telling him that he was the one who rescued him, just like he did with Child 5. With Child 5, apparently Chica was just feeling a lot more, aggressive, saying that they took live hostages at the house and then to lure them in by saying that he kidnapped the entire family. I'm using Chica and William Afton here interchangeably, just a little bit for the sake of the theory, but I don't think this theory is true, so we're about to discuss all of that here at the end. The theory goes on to talk about the Midnight Motorist child being the puppet, saying that this character is the child from Midnight Motorist, and that the way Chica talks about him is referencing that minigame, saying, quote, I told him to come over later, that should be enough, and if he doesn't show up, I'll just go to his house, and if he doesn't open the door, I'll just open a window. Chimney's always an option, or I could set the house on fire and wait for him to run out, end quote. For context, the kid in Midnight Motorist had a rough day because William Afton stalked him and told him to come home. This child's family's situation is unfortunate. The only place safe for him to be was his room. He thought that he would come looking for him. The boy didn't lock himself in the room for his father. He did it for Afton. He did it so that he wouldn't reach him. So this theory is kind of saying that the orange one isn't really William Afton. I know a lot of people have discussed that the character that is portrayed by the orange guy is actually William Afton, but this theory dismisses that, saying that it's actually the father of the child that William Afton is trying to kidnap for the sleep experiments in Didophobia. And then it talks about how the last one is Rory, who is the protagonist of Didophobia. And then how the cinematic ends is by saying that Chica is heartbroken that everything didn't turn out all right, and it's indicative of William Afton not having enough or efficient results, but continuing with the research. It concludes by saying, at the moment, we know that William Afton kidnapped 7 children whom he watched and studied for his experiments. 7 children who were given up for lost and who never saw the light of day again. Oh yeah, it could be that some of the children from the dream experiments managed to have a chance to get out of there. Not alive, of course. It's a possibility. You can never say that William didn't take a child out there unknowingly. Maybe a child who should have never been there. Maybe the one you shouldn't have killed. Okay, this is talking about the vengeful spirit now. Let's talk about this now. Of course, this is linked in the description if you want to go check it out. I highly recommend you do. There might be some details I missed, and it's also just fun to check out different theories. This one was made a year ago now, so we have a lot more evidence to work with. I like covering older theories because It gives us more time for new stuff to come out with new evidence that can be used to build upon or tear down older theories. It's also fun talking about old lore as well. But yeah, no, there's a weird undertone here because in the cinematics context, right? Chica is trying to get each of the love interests to fall for her. And what this series is saying is that is representing William Afton, a grown man, trying to kidnap children. So that's weird and a little disturbing. Only brave takes on this channel, but dismissing that just because it's weird and I don't really want to. I don't think that's the point of this theory. It's more so just talking about how this gives context for didophobia or even just the sleep experiments that William Afton did, which while there's not much information on that, I don't think there's that big of a connection between the two of them. I think it's mostly just an exaggerated reference to the mainline games that is like a fun way to introduce them. While there could be lore and stuff here, maybe it's referencing for other things, just because this is a game thing that doesn't directly tie into the books. Also, we can debunk it just in the ways that William Afton supposedly lured the children. I'm pretty sure he just like took them away or had like a different plan. Saying that he needed help with his homework is kind of a weird trick. A lot of these seem very exaggerating or probably wouldn't have worked with that different context. It's just reaching too much. I don't know. In terms of, for these series, I usually cover the storytelling aspect of it just because they actually deliver character motivations or even just give context to more of the plot and why things happen the way they happen beyond just events. For this theory, there's not really any of that. Maybe that's why I don't like the theory as much, because if true, all it does is give context for how William Afton kidnapped the children and like the order he did it in. It doesn't really change much story-wise. Doesn't really give context to his motivations because it doesn't explain why he wants to kidnap them, which could be key information to know. It explains things but doesn't really give any character motivations or just add anything to the plot. Also, it just kind of makes William Afton even creepier in like a different way that Scott Cawthon himself didn't exactly want for the FNAF universe. I don't even think that this cutscene even has that much lore in it. I just think it's a fun, like, cinematic. It reminds me of that hippo in Ultimate Custom Night, just saying like, oh, it's not that deep, bro. Don't look that much into it. Sometimes the story is just a story. And the fact that they come from the same game, maybe it's, related. Scott Cawthon isn't exactly known for always having a lore bit. There are many red herrings. There are many like things to misdirect you. As in-depth as this theory is, it has like a big so what attached to it. I think the only reason this theory got as big as it did, other than maybe Daco, I think a lot of people were mentioning that Daco has said this as a joke, was that it's just the idea of Toy Chica being William Afton is kind of funny. I thought so too. I thought that there was nothing more to this, but apparently there was, and then there's this whole thing. Overall, this is kind of a weird theory. I mean, on a real note, it doesn't really make me feel that strongly or just anything exciting to talk about storytelling wise. So I think for the sake of this theory, we always rate them. You're getting a solid, 2.5 Freddy Fazbears. Five Nights at Freddy's puppet has a pretty dark theory string to it. And if it's true, might create a brutal narrative and have serious character and story implications. This is the puppet stuff theory that claims some really interesting stuff that the puppet did. A lot of this theory came from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2. Mostly FNAF 2, it's one of those older theories that gets brought up every so often. And I have to say, I think I have some hot takes over this theory. And what's interesting is that since this theory doesn't hold up as well anymore, it's kind of toned down the puppet's character. Because with this theory, what the puppet did is pretty messed up for a child to do. It's basically canon that the puppet in FNAF 2 is possessed by Charlie, or Charlotte Emily, the daughter of Henry Emily, and is still a kid, potentially being the first victim of William Afton, depending on the timeline you follow. Puppet Stuff claims that the puppet was the one who stuffed the bodies of the children from the missing children incident in the original animatronics after they were victims of William Afton, to force them to possess the animatronics. The strongest piece of evidence for this is in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame that occurs in FNAF 2, randomly after getting jump scared, where you play as a puppet to attach the masks of the animatronics to the kids. Under the theory, this minigame would be explaining how the puppet put the children's bodies into the suits. giving life to them by allowing them to come back to life, almost, by possessing the animatronics. The notable exception to this theory is the child who possesses Golden Freddy, which could be for a couple of reasons. People have theorized that Cassidy, who is probably the other child, was spring-locked into the Golden Freddy suit already by William Afton, which explains the twitching and weird imagery with Golden Freddy. But that's a whole other theory that's not too relevant to this one. Obviously, Golden Freddy is a unique case, so it makes sense that their possession might be under a completely different circumstance, and it doesn't tear down this theory completely. Normally for these videos, I cover all the evidence, then counter evidence, and then lastly the narrative and the story. But for the sake of this video, I think it's best to cover the narrative that this theory presents before getting started with the counter evidence. A lot of the counter evidence is pretty straightforward or has to do with the plot inconsistencies, so it'll be easier this way. The final piece of context needed for this theory is about Charlie possessing the puppet. The puppet was created by Charlie's father, Henry Emily, who designed the puppet to protect her, and keeping an eye on her by tracking a green wristband that she wore. Supposedly, Henry did this because he was suspicious of William Afton, as they were both partners at the time who ran Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and was concerned over the safety of his daughter. But the extent of that really depends on the timeline. Anyways, the puppet briefly lost track of Charlie, and then found her dying in the alley behind the restaurant, and held her in their arms as she died. Through physical contact, Charlie's soul was now able to possess a puppet. At some point, Charlie realized she was possessing the puppet now. So what exactly does this theory bring to the story, and how is it dramatically different if this wasn't true? You might not expect it, but a lot of the plot changes depending on who stuffed the animatronics with the children. I should also mention that the children being hidden inside the bodies of the suits is canon with how they possess the animatronics, but there is pretty disgusting imagery behind it. I mean, whoever did it, it's still a disturbing thought that is tragically normalized in the FNAF community. With how much I'm talking about it, I hope I don't get demonetized. I mean, I don't exactly pull the same numbers as someone like Math Hat, so if you want me to cover your favorite or least favorite disturbing FNAF lore, make sure to subscribe and comment down below. For this theory, it's important to keep in mind that Charlie is a kid, one who suffered an intense tragedy by a horrible monster. Upon coming across other victims, instead of letting them pass on, she deliberately stuffed them into the suits of the classic Freddy Fazbear's animatronics, knowing that they would come back to life and haunt them. That is such a terrifying thought to imagine a child doing, not only with the bodies, but with the act of knowing the basic rules behind possession. And it really wasn't out of ill intent towards the other children. Now there's a couple reasons as to why she did this. Some people think it was out of just trying to help out the other children by making them come back to life. Remember, this is the reasoning of a child. A bit of a darker one is that while she does want to help the other kids, she also wants justice and revenge against William Afton, and she can't do it alone. It could have been just taking advantage of an unfortunate opportunity, and I think under that narrative, it makes the puppet a more nuanced and interesting character. With either reason, I don't think a child that young would comprehend just how terrible being unable to pass on peacefully could be. By doing this, the puppet trapped the souls of the other children, maybe for good intentions, but forcing them to live under horrible conditions. And I think that makes for a compelling and tragic story. It makes the children's spirits finally being able to move on in the end a more impactful moment, because maybe after a while they were rightfully consumed by vengeance, and letting go of that hate became increasingly difficult. I think this theory fleshes out the puppet's character, and even the other animatronics to an extent, in a way that gives her less of a black and white moral compass, and a more realistic gray one where she had a more grounded reaction to the horrible fate she suffered. I think these new layers for the character make her stand out. Of course, she wasn't thinking ahead of what will happen by making the other children possess the animatronics. Instead, I think she was doing what she thought was right, given that she's a child who probably wasn't thinking long term. That is a really cool story. It shares an interesting insight into a cool character. Unfortunately, the more we talk about plot, the more plot holes open up. Okay, so the main problem with this theory is that it goes against William Afton stuffing the suits himself to hide the bodies, or to experiment with how the remnant or possession works depending on what theories you follow. And honestly, on a technical level, it makes more sense for William Afton to have done this. He needed a place to hide the bodies. I mean, I guess he did just leave Charlie out in the alley, but the thing is, in the books and movies, it was all William Afton who stuffed the animatronics. However, how does this explain the minigame? Well, people have theorized that the minigame is more of a spiritual or metaphorical interpretation, where the puppet just helps and guides the souls to possess the animatronics in a smoother and clean way. Because she didn't do this with Golden Freddy in the minigame, it would also explain why they aren't as put together. The main point is that the puppet was trying to help the spirits for the same kind of reasons as before, by trying to help the other victims. It's just that this is kind of boring. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an interesting concept, it just cuts out a lot of potential for the puppet as a character. Under this interpretation, she's more of a protective figure, but loses out on some of the agency and gray area that uses revenge or justice as motivation. If this puppet stuff theory is true, it also turns William Afton into a less interesting character. In a lot of old timelines, it's important that he is the one who hid the bodies in the animatronic suits, whether intentionally knowing that they would get possessed in order to study a remnant, or to get away with it as to hide the evidence. If the puppet did stuff the suits, then William Afton would lose a lot of interesting character implications that could make for a good story. But here's my hot take. I think it'd be worth it. Neither of these options are bad, they just create different stories with a different focus. If William Afton stuffed the suits for any reason, it would give him a more active role in the story, as it ends up with the children possessing the animatronics because of him. It would also make him eventually getting spring-locked a fitting fate for his character, which is really compelling. If the puppet did it, then it would give her and even the animatronics more of a role in the story, because they would have a motivated goal to get revenge on William Afton, which is also compelling. On the puppet's part, it would create a reason for the animatronics to come to life, and even give her a nuanced goal, because it asks questions about a character that is up to the audience to solve. Is she wrong to get justice? No, but was it right for her to force this fate on other children in order to stop William Afton? That's where it creates an interesting character, because different people would have different opinions on her doing this, and ultimately it makes sense that she sees this action as a good thing. Maybe over time she could even struggle with the consequences of this. As for the rest of the counter evidence, I think the story redirected its focus a bit after FNAF 2. From what I saw about people talking about the books and even watching the movie, William Afton is always the one who is responsible for the animatronics getting possessed. Even in the games, his character is explored more, like in Sister Location, and a lot of theories and stories rely on him realizing the rules behind Remnant. The answer of the question to who stuffed the animatronics relies on how you interpret the minigame, Give Gifts, Give Life, whether you see it as literal or spiritual. I really like this theory. As much as it opens up criticism and events that happened, the story and characterization that it gives a puppet is tragic. I like interesting storytelling, which is why when even looking at FNAF theories, it's a huge point in my videos to focus on the narrative. If Five Nights at Freddy's was ever actually solved, as much as it would make everyone happy, it would also have to be a good story to keep everyone satisfied. Probably not, but it's definitely a result, as when I researched this theory to see what people thought about it, there was a lot of discussion which boiled down to people liking the story with the puppet being responsible. But is this theory true? Probably not. I don't think it is with the evidence I've seen. However, feel free to discuss in the comments. But regardless, I do like it. At the end of these videos, I always rate the theories for fun, and I'm giving this theory 8 Freddy Fazbears. This one was recommended by a lot of you, and quite a lot of people strongly disliked this theory, and we'll get to why later on. As always with FNAF theories, there is quite a lot of evidence to go through, even if they don't hold up. There's just so much information in Five Nights at Freddy's games. Now, generally, I have lukewarm takes. It's easy, for example, to say things like, the FNAF adult theory is bad. But since this one has a bit more evidence to stand on, arguably, maybe it's a hot take to say that this theory is bad. And the one we're covering today is Will Care, or the theory that William Afton cares about his kids and was a good father. Now, that might sound like it's good at first, but there is some pretty strong counter evidence that makes this a really deceiving theory. The thing is, the more information comes out about William Afton, the worse he gets. We're not going to dive deep into his actions in the series, but he is a monster, which may have sparked some people to try to find more nuance in his character. So, theorists looked into how he treated his kids. There is a lot of information about William Afton's parenting, more than I originally thought before starting this video. Let's start with the crying child first, which I'll be using information from the FNAF 4 minigames. There are a few posts and theories that assume that William Afton is talking to the crying child through the Fredbear plush in these minigames. We will talk about the story stuff and the subtext here at the end, but a lot of this relies on details like these being true. Through the Fredbear plush, you can be seen comforting the child as he, cries. Though there is a text bubble change at the end of this minigame, which might be the puppet or even Michael Afton, but let's say that most of this is William Afton. That means that William, while being busy and unable to be there for his kid, set up a camera with a speaker inside the plush to keep an eye on him, and talk to him when he's not there. However, this all is assuming that William Afton is speaking through the Fredbear plush, which might not be the case. In either situation, one thing is true though, the notable absence of William Afton being there for his son. There is only one scene where he shows up in the background, stuffing somebody in a suit, or putting their costume head on. From the post I saw, a significant amount of evidence relies on William Afton being the voice behind the plush, because otherwise he's just not there for his son while the child is clearly suffering. It's weird that I keep having to call him the child, but he doesn't have a name, or he does, but no one's been able to find it. I love Five Nights at Freddy's so much. In order for William Afton to be a good parent, he would actually have to care about his son and would notice the sadness. Another big thing that points to him actually caring about his kid is the line, "I will put you back together." It's very debated about who actually said this, but assuming that it is William Afton, it would imply that he is stricken with grief over the accident the child had, and will do whatever it takes to help his son. A lot of will care believers believe this is evidence for the theory. This point actually kicks off a lot of theories, saying this is how William discovered Remnant when the Freddy animatronic started showing signs of being possessed after biting the kid. That's not really relevant to this theory, but I just figured I'd mention it. So assuming this theory is true, in the story, William being busy running the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria sets up a camera and a speaker to keep an eye on the crying child, and confronts him while making up for his absence. When the bite accident happens, William presumably stops everything to try to help his son. But what about how he treats his other kids? The easiest one to cover would be Elizabeth, with the most evidence coming from sister location. In the game, William Afton had made the Circus Baby animatronic based off Elizabeth Afton. However, he had repeatedly prevented her from seeing Circus Baby. This is because he knew that the animatronic was designed to scoop up a kid when the coast was clear. Yeah, he added it in this grabby arm thing inside the animatronic to grab a kid. He's not a good person. This animatronic was dangerous, and William Afton tried to unsuccessfully keep Elizabeth away. Afterward, William closed down Circus Baby Pizza World. The theory claims that because William tried his best to keep Elizabeth safe from Circus Baby, it shows that he cares about her to some extent, and that the fact that he was unsuccessful made him close the place down out of grief. Just keep this in mind for now. Let's cover how he treats Michael Afton, his other son, before we talk about the evidence. There really isn't much to support this theory for Michael. At best, I guess you could say he doesn't discipline him because even though he torments his brother with a Foxy mask in FNAF 4 minigames, he never gets a talking to. When it comes to Michael, there are actually a few examples where he was being mistreated by William. In Sister Location, for example, William had sent him to the facility without really giving him a heads up that the animatronics are dangerous, resulting in him getting scooped. Also, under the theory that it was William Afton in the Midnight Motorist minigame, it would show him being uncaring and a bad parent to the point where Michael ran away as a kid. So because of that, let's start debunking. It's worth mentioning that there is a bunch of information on William in the books. However, it's unclear if they are in the same timeline and everything, so we're going to stick strictly to the game. I'm pretty sure the books are in their own timeline, but someone can let me know in the comments. I still gotta read them. Firstly, with the crying child, if William was actually using the Fredbear plush, he would have done so much more if he had actually cared about his son. Assuming the voices are even him, Michael was bullying his younger brother and getting away with it, noticeably affecting the child. When it comes to Elizabeth, some have said that William used reverse psychology to get her scooped by preventing her from seeing Circus Baby so that she can go see him on her own time. I think that's a little unlikely, but if he did care about her, he would have clearly noticed how much she liked Circus Baby. So the smart choice would have been just to reprogram the animatronic or give another one the grabby arm, not that one. Her death could have easily been avoided. As for the event of being why he closed down Circus Baby World, that doesn't necessarily mean he did it out of grief. He could have, but the accident would have been really bad for publicity and his image. And William Afton even tried covering it up, which isn't a good look on his character. That at all isn't definitive proof he cared about Elizabeth. I don't think William even likes his son, Michael, at all. I haven't found any evidence of that in will care theories or any posts. Most of them point out examples in FNAF 4, and Michael's just kind of in the background. So as far as credibility for this theory, I'd say it's pretty weak. But the interesting part about it, in my opinion, is what it introduces to the story. So let's talk about what the story looks like if this was true, and later we'll get to why people dislike the theory. William Afton is definitely one of the main characters in Five Nights at Freddy's story. He and Henry created the animatronics, and most importantly, he was the main villain behind the tragedies in the games. What this theory seems to be trying to do is add nuance to his character. Obviously, William Afton is a horrible person. We're not going to dive into that too much because the extent of it really depends on the timeline and theories, but he's behind some of the darker moments in the series. It's not so much justifying his actions, the theory is just trying to humanize him, by saying he isn't completely a monster because look, he at least cares about his kids. Well, except for Michael, but he's an ugly kid, so that's what the point of the mask is. But the thing is, with this theory, it doesn't match any of his actions in the story. It's like trying to gaslight you into thinking that William is a good dad, which weirdly makes him look worse. Now it feels like he's the one pushing for this theory in a weird, narcissistic sort of way. Look, a story about a horrible man committing atrocities in his family pizzeria, and underneath it all being broken and caring for his kids, could work, if written well. Seeing a man struggle with balancing his double life and trying to shelter his kids from who he really is would make a really interesting narrative. However, there are just not any points where this interesting idea can be displayed. If this theory were to be true, it would make the writing feel worse, because this feels like a half-baked attempt to introduce nuance to a villain. It's okay to have a villain be really bad with little redeeming qualities. It just comes down to how the story treats the character. On the flip side, I think FNAF as a story would actually benefit from him being a bad father. His children all end up with terrible fates, and presents Michael through the first few games in Sister Location as a protagonist who needs to take down his dad. Not just because he's a monster, but because it's personal. His siblings all suffered by both of their hands, because remember, Michael did bully his brother and accidentally caused his death. For Michael to stop William, it would almost be like making up for his mistakes in the past, as William would represent the evils that the Afton family can succumb to. Elizabeth, after possessing Circus Baby, is pretty sympathetic to her father, having a few lines where it's clear that she still seeks his approval, making it more compelling and even tragic that after her accident, William still used her against Michael in Sister Location. Having sympathetic villains can make a good story, but forcing them to have unredeemable qualities isn't needed. Ultimately, I think a lot of people don't like this theory because it downplays William's mistreatment of his kids, and also it just barely has any legs to stand on. Narratively, it just doesn't make the story any better. It just makes him seem stupid because if he did care about his kids, they would probably still be alive. All he had to do was be there for them and not make a deadly animatronic based on his daughter. I was surprised by a few posts really committing to this theory. I originally thought this is one of those joke ones, but thank you for recommending this as one of the worst FNAF theories. It gets 1.5 Freddy Fazbears. Around 9 years ago, someone made a post about Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location and talked about a very controversial theory. And by very controversial, I mean like a few people saw it, but a lot of the older fans know that it's one that gained a little bit of traction just because of how silly it was. So let's read it and break it down. Of course, I'll be linking the post in the description, and I just like revisiting older Five Nights at Freddy's theories. So, and this was definitely one of the funniest ones I found. I also just think how it's written is extremely, I don't know, interesting, but let me know what you guys think. Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location will take place in an underground bunker, and here's why. Note, this is my opinion about how the games work, and look, when it comes out, so no hate, and if you hate, I'll be mercilessly laughing at your stupidity. Okay, so this is a decent preface actually about how there's a lot of theories about games before they come out. So naturally, I'm not going to be too harsh with the debunking this time around just because it's an older theory, but I do want to talk about why this theory doesn't work using the evidence we know now. I like covering older lore because of this, I think I mentioned this before, but it's pretty interesting to talk about older theories just because we have all this evidence and all of these new games out now. So it might make the theory look silly, but sometimes it's okay. I don't know, I feel like this part's a little condescending, but it's 9 years old. I mean, theory starts by saying, this is my theory for the story lore of the Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location. Judging by the environment the game takes place, the text at one part of the first trailer, and the sound at the end trailer, based on the environment, it looks like the game takes place in the future. If some of that sounds a little wonky, that's maybe just how it's written. Please credit Zombie Wars SMT for that theory. Okay, so it looks like Zombie Wars SMT came up with a theory that it takes place in the future. The actual location looks like it's an underground bunker, kind of like from the Fallout series. So the place you're in is in a bunker and you're underground. The evidence for that theory is the text and the sound at the end of the trailer. For instance, the text in the trailer says the following: deep below ground. And what does that below mean? I think that it means it's underground. If you said underneath or lower level, you're absolutely right. Bro, what is this? What is this, like a Dora the Explorer? Where is the house? Is it one of those old kid shows? Why is it written like this? I'm making fun of a 9-year-old post. What am I doing? Where was I? And what's underneath or at a lower level and you can build and live in it? If you said a basement, you're dead wrong. It's a bunker. So you're in a bunker and the animatronics are down there with you, obviously trying to kill you. Last but not least, the last piece of evidence is a sound at the end of the trailer. I'm sure this is referring to the Sister Location trailer, which Scott Cawthon did post on his YouTube channel. If you watch the trailer, you probably didn't hear it, but watch it again until you get to the end. But listen very closely. And if you do, you will actually hear a siren. It's not a normal siren, neither. It's longer than your normal, average, everyday siren. How many sirens do you hear every day? I mean, are you talking about like a police siren or something? I mean, okay, it's not a normal siren neither. It's longer than your everyday, and it's rare that you hear it. Well, a tornado warning siren, on the other hand, you hear that on occasion. This very rare siren that you may not have heard of in the trailer is pause for effect. They actually wrote pause for effect in there. I forget this is Reddit sometimes. A nuclear siren. Yes, you heard that correctly. A nuclear siren. Now, I didn't want to go this far, but based on the evidence, I'll have to say it. You're one of the humans in the area who's still alive after the nuclear outbreak, and the fun time animatronics went to said bunker and infiltrated the bunker. And afterwards, they killed almost everyone in the bunker, leaving you to be the last person in the bunker. Okay, that was a lot of information. Let's break it down. There's a chance this could be satire. There is a chance. Someone commented on my sister location theory, my previous sister location theory about the adult theory, that one was satire, but there is no evidence to say that one is satire. Nothing has come out. I researched it after I got that comment because I was curious about it, because I figured, if something's satire, I can clear it up. But nope, you're wrong. I'm right. Yeah, that's gonna go over well. No, but there's a lot of satire theories and it's very silly theories, but until I find something that says that this was explicitly made as a joke, I couldn't find anything for this one. I couldn't find anything for the other one. Let me know if you find an actual source. So what this theory is saying, if I understand it correctly, the story that is painting is that this game takes place after a nuclear war, okay? And that means there's a siren going on in the trailer. And that means that, this is after the nuclear war, everything, after the outbreak. You're one of the only living humans left in a bunker, despite the fact that the bunker has like Five Nights at Freddy's merchandise or whatever. Okay, I'm actually curious. Is it saying that the Funtime animatronics are already in there, or they went and infiltrated the bunker and like slaughtered everybody there? Is that what it's saying? Because it's saying here in the text that the Funtime animatronics went to the bunker and infiltrated it, and then they like beat everybody there. But the bunker itself already has like Five Nights at Freddy's memorabilia and everything under the theory. Obviously, we know that this is just a rental facility called for Circus Baby's rental facility, and which is why it has like all this weird like exposed wires and everything everywhere, which makes sense. It makes sense that this is like a rental place. For say it's a bunker that just happens to be invaded by Five Nights at Freddy's animatronics is wild, because there's already Five Nights at Freddy's stuff around. You think the person who made the bunker was just a big FNAF fan or Freddy Fazbear's fan? He was like, yeah, I just really want to decorate my bunker with this Chuck E. Cheese type of restaurant. I'm a really big fan. I grew up going there often, so I'm just gonna put all of those decorations around there. I mean, I'm not gonna blame him. If I make a bunker or something for a nuclear war, I'm probably gonna put like Spider-Man merchandise everywhere. I love Spider-Man, but still a little bit weird. Okay, and then the Funtime animatronics, this is implying that they infiltrate the bunker, that they're not already in there. So that means that the Five Nights at Freddy's animatronics survived the nukes. They survived the warfare and are just wandering around, just picking off people for a reason or something. Maybe they're just like bored. I mean, I don't know. I guess I would be too. What is there to do for animatronics possessed by children? to do in a nuclear war. I think that's just a little bit much. I don't know. I'm curious on hearing the actual siren that's at the end of the video. I might go check that out. What? This is obviously, like, it's wrong, but you can see how this is a pretty silly theory. I'm surprised on the actual post, I don't see it getting that much traction. It has like 16 comments and no upvotes. But whenever people were talking about it in my comments about just the worst theories, I thought it was a bigger theory than it already was. I've only ever heard of this. Actually, you know, reading through these comments, I think this is supposed to be rage bait or something. What's the sister location FNAF bunker theory? Rage bait? I'm reading through it right now and somebody was saying, because of how it's written, right? It's written like very condescending and being like, if I get any hate on this, then you're the one who's stupid. That's what OP was saying. But he's responding like to other people just in the comments, just, I don't know, in a way that makes it seem like it's kind of trolling almost, or rage baiting. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I know I was saying earlier that it's probably not satire, but I don't know, it probably is, because one of the comments was saying how this account is fairly new, and that was around the time when this was posted. How did this theory get so much traction? Because I know that quite a lot of people were talking about this. This is not much. Oh. Okay, so from like a story element, I don't even know if this series, like, I always talk about the storytelling element when talking about these theories, and like, what even is the point here? This just means that like the world ended, and then there's like vicious animatronics just going around and attacking people for some reason. I mean, it could be cool as like a little horror game idea, but not with Finance of Freddy's. Finance of Freddy's was already established to be like this, like, night guard. It goes to a fast food pizzeria and like watches the cameras, things are out of place, the animatronics are out of place. To turn that all into like a nuclear war setting and have it be this like post-apocalyptic horror game is a really big tonal shift. It wouldn't really make sense for that to happen. I wish there was something more tangible to talk about. Like, a lot of these claims are extremely baseless. It repeats itself multiple times. For this to get the level of, I don't know, attention that it did is kind of funny. I don't think that whenever people were hyping this up in my comments or just talking about it in other places, I thought that there would be more to it than that. But nope, this is really much it. So I'm just gonna give it a very lackluster 2 Freddy Fazbears. I am very disappointed with the sister location underground bunker theory. Five Nights at Freddy's earliest theories were bad. They were terrible. Oh my. They don't make sense, and they do not fill in with a lot of the other lore that is presented, even just from FNAF 2. FNAF 2 and FNAF 3 debunked so many theories, and that's not even starting a lot of the other lore implications later on in the series. I mean, you had all these weird theories that came from cherry-picked evidence, but it wasn't even like the internet's fault at the time, just because there was a lot of evidence to support just any full picture surrounding the game. It was to the point where Game Theory basically made their first video saying that this entire thing was based on a real life event, which according to Scott Cawthon wasn't actually true. Looking back, a lot of the story details were really sparse, and while it kickstarted a lot of the mascot horror genre, and one of the common tropes being the hidden story that isn't apparent from linear playthrough, there just wasn't enough to piece together a full plot. And some of these are just straight up weird and rely on very, very loose evidence. They're really, really silly, but I'm gonna be honest, I kind of like some of them. Some of them are really creative in terms of how they straight up make up story elements in order to make the theory work. And as much as it might not be very strong from an evidence perspective, storytelling wise, a lot of creativity and very inspiring works were created out of Five Nights at Freddy's debut. One of the most common theories was the phone guy being the main villain behind Five Nights at Freddy's. It was mentioned that there was missing kids, which started the whole momentum of people thinking that the animatronics were possessed by those kids. But who actually was responsible behind that? A lot of people pointed to the only other character, and the only character with speaking lines, being the phone guy. I think a lot of this was actually just straight up due to how there was literally no other characters in the game besides the animatronics. But even then, it kind of makes sense. I mean, he was a little weird, just looking back, strangely happy and stuff, which doesn't make sense if the animatronics are being very quirky or whatever. Maybe he just thought it was silly, but a lot of them are straight up scary. I would not have that kind of optimistic attitude whenever surrounded by animatronics that are a little bit run down and freaky and whatever, especially not after one of them bit a kid. This is actually a theory that is referenced in the FNAF movie, where William Afton, playing the career counselor that, walks Michael Schmidt through his responsibilities as the night guard. How he presents this information is through the phone, and even says the whole flip side phrase, which directly calls back to the phone guy. Whether intentionally or not, it was a pretty cool nod to that idea that the phone guy was actually the killer, being William Afton. But Purple Guy wasn't even introduced until FNAF 2, so very limited information to work on here. I do like, actually, from a storytelling perspective, how the animatronics aren't the main antagonistic force behind the game. Instead, they're more of a vehicle or a consequence of the main villain's actions. The fact that that speculation came from even just the first game, that there was more behind the story or more villains behind the animatronics being purposely malicious, is pretty cool and kind of predicted the finer and hidden story elements, and I actually really do like it. It's also just a very big blast from the past type of thing, where it's one of the earliest series on even just like game theory and speculation behind the broader community. I love it a lot, and I love talking about it and revisiting it, so I'm gonna give it a solid 7 Freddy Fazbears. This next theory has a lot to do with the phone guy's death, actually. Chica has teeth in some of the cameras, which led a lot of people to believe that it actually looked like human teeth. And because there's no other character in the game, a lot of people took this as the phone guy actually being stuffed into the Chica animatronic. I guess it just wouldn't make sense from a design perspective to give Chica teeth when she already has a beak. It just wouldn't make sense from a design perspective. But this is one of those theories that are bad just because it's only one piece of evidence and it's very warped to fit a story plot. As much as it is creative, it could just be because it's a horror game and, teeth in a beak make it a little bit creepier. But I do love how people were inspired and, motivated to create these creative stories. But still, it doesn't really introduce that much other than Phone Guy's death. I'm going to give it a solid 4 Freddy Fazbears. Having to do with Chica, though, the cupcake is still kind of a weird character. A lot of people at the time thought that the cupcake was actually sentient or alive, and that it was a separate force other than the Chica animatronic and not part of it. I'm gonna be honest, I thought this for the longest time too, just because it's kind of its own thing. Even in the FNAF movie, which came out way after, it's basically its own little machine or whatever. That thing is aggressive and vicious, and Chica just kind of lets it do its own thing. But regardless, in the first game, a lot of people thought that the reasoning behind the blinking and just how it gets separated from Chica is the reasoning behind it being alive, or that there was an actual camera behind the cupcake. Quite a lot of theories behind it. I think it's pretty fun and pretty harmless, all things considered. As much as there being a kid actually possessed in the cupcake, not a lot of evidence for that, but I'll give it a solid 5 Freddy Fazbears. The next one is actually the golden phone theory, which says that the end screen where someone is stuffed inside the Freddy suit is actually the phone guy being stuffed into Golden Freddy. And this is the character who terrorizes you as Golden Freddy with the "it's me" imagery and just like the weird glitchiness around the character. I actually kind of like this from a storytelling perspective, just because it adds more of a creepiness level and also just gives more story behind Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy in that first game had like no information. It was just kind of creepy and very little story behind it, even behind the little Easter eggs around it, which led a lot of people grasping at straws to prove that like, oh, he's phone guy potentially. It's still a little weird though. I'm kind of glad that it ended up being phone guy, just because I as much as phone guy being a villain or Golden Freddy or even just stuff inside Chica, I like him being his own little side character who unfortunately does end up being a victim of the animatronics later on. I don't necessarily want him to be a villain. I think he's just a funny character who is a little too optimistic in its setting. But that guy is strangely happy around, all this chaos and making jokes and whatever. Anyways, the golden phone theory is just kind of warping a lot of the evidence and whatever. Not like outlandish or anything intentionally bad, but it's just not one that aged really well. So I'm going to give it a solid 3 Freddy Fazbears. Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate the disclaimer here. This is the theory where I can't even mention the name of it. And this theory was actually made by XX Pro Class Gamers XX in 2014. I'm gonna link their videos in the description below. I highly recommend that you go check them out. It's pretty interesting, and as much as some of the details were very exaggerated, it kind of predicted the later FNAF lore. Just a brief summary and synopsis. It revolved around a scientist fleeing from World War II, being a German scientist, part of, the wrong side of history, meeting up with another scientist called John Smith. They would later come together to make a pizzeria with the purpose of experimenting on children in order to achieve immortality. They had a shared interest for science, using the pizzeria as a front to basically pick off kids to be immortal. They believed that whatever the process they were using with the animatronics would allow them to get reincarnated or just live forever using their souls. The thing is though, Sister Location kind of has some of this theory in it, with Michael Apthing intentionally creating the circus baby animatronic to, scoop up a kid and study the remnant or whatever. And even at the time too, these characters were completely made up. Their names straight up and their backstories and everything completely made up, which is what made this theory kind of bad from a theorizing and evidence perspective. But from a purely storytelling perspective, it was really cool and really creative, and I liked it a lot. Although some of the details, like that group from World War II, a little bit unnecessary, but behind all that edginess, I think that there's a good narrative here that has a lot of strange coincidences with how Henry, Emily, and William Afton are, being two people who came together with their, newfound love for animatronics and entertainment and putting together the pizzeria, when one takes it a little bit too far to experiment with possession and remnant. It's a really cool theory, and a lot of it, the bigger picture, is put together really well. This is one of those fleshed out theories that actually creates a whole narrative, not just explaining one little detail. As much as it is really out there and a little bit, hyperbolic in some areas, I like it because it presents a full picture. It's more than just, this is why, like the cupcake is alive, or actually the phone guy is bad. It presents a full beginning to end narrative, and I think storytelling like that is important, especially for games like this, where there probably isn't even a full story there without the help of people putting together all the pieces and timelines and everything. A lot of people dog on it for being one of the worst theories, but honestly, that one belongs to Foxy is a good guy, which is, I argue, a whole lot worse than this theory. But honestly, removing the demonetization element out of it, because I think YouTube straight up will demonetize this video if I talk about it in the amount of detail that I want to. It's pretty cool, and I highly recommend you check out the videos to learn more about it. I'm gonna give it a solid 7 Freddy Fazbears. Before we cover this next few theories, I do want to say that if you want me to cover more disturbing Fnaf lore and everything, subscribing would be a big help, as sometimes YouTube does like to push these videos back just a little bit due to the subject matter. And if you love Five Nights at Freddy's, you might as well subscribe, because I'm going to keep talking about quite a few theories that I'm really passionate about, or even just the older lore in future videos. Easily one of the worst theories is Foxy is a good guy theory. And I know I've talked about it before, so I'm actually going to talk about why and the evidence presented. I don't think I referenced that really before. I just kind of talked about it as a storytelling thing. Foxy's whole mechanic is that you have to actually check up on him through the cameras. And if you don't, then he comes running to you. And a lot of people took this as him being like, hey, you haven't checked in a while. How are you doing, basically? And his jump scare too, other than the running up, is a little bit lackluster, where he just kind of slides in. He's the only one that doesn't even jump at you, which led a lot of people to think that, oh, maybe he's just like, accidentally giving you a heart attack whenever he comes in through that door. I think that this might be why Foxy in FNAF 2 has that huge jump scare and that big difference, because it was intentionally trying to debunk that first theory. I don't know, hot take, but I think the animatronics are, not exactly the friendliest. I know, only brave takes on this channel. This next theory is called the hide and seek theory, and I actually kind of like this one a lot. This is a theory that says that animatronics actually are just playing hide and seek with you through the cameras, and they're just trying to hide from you. This kind of calls to them being children, and the children possessing the animatronics are just kind of playing around with you. And when you lose and they stuff you inside the suit, they don't know that it kills you. They just straight up think like, oh, you lost, time to get in the suit, which, maybe it's a little weird, but they're kids, so whatever. And then whenever you don't come out of the suit, they're just like, maybe he just doesn't want to keep playing. But this theory the hide and seek theory just says that they're just kids having fun, that not a lot of this is malicious or anything. They're just trying to play hide and seek and, catch you off guard or scare you. In terms of game design, not a lot of evidence suggests this, but I kind of like this because it suggests that there's more to their character and motivation behind, just trying to attack you or anything. This kind of develops some nuance behind the characters, and it's a theory that probably a lot of the newer Five Nights at Freddy's theorists might not even know about because, you know, it's bad and doesn't make any sense. A lot of theories like this one get forgotten and just lost to time, but I think it's worthwhile to, you know, revisit it because it has some creative elements that present a new fun storytelling element. That being said, it is kind of bad there is no evidence to suggest this. I feel like for a few night guards, they'd notice that the suits, you know, are probably hurting the night guards after they stuff him in there, which is completely counterproductive because if they want to keep playing hide and seek with you, they probably wouldn't try to hurt you. But I don't know, that requires a lot of reasoning behind the mind of a child. Maybe they're just like being very impulsive or whatever. Now, this last theory says that Mike is actually the killer behind the missing children incident, and that the reason the animatronics are trying to attack you is because you're playing as Michael Afton. Or I guess at this point it would just be Mike. William Afton, or like the Afton name wasn't introduced until way later, so this would just be Mike. I don't think this theory makes a lot of sense, as much as it is providing reasoning, and does get referenced later on, being that the animatronics probably do attack Mike because they recognize him being related to William Afton, or at least looking very similarly. I don't think it really makes sense for the guy behind the incident to come back to the restaurant as a night guard for money or whatever. It doesn't make sense to revisit that scene of the crime. It'd just be very stupid and very, you know, short-sighted. So there's surprisingly a lot of theories that try to point Mike as being either Springtrap or some antagonistic force, which really warps the story into you playing as the bad guy. As much as that could be cool, there's just not a lot of evidence that supports that. Some of you were asking why the adult theory wasn't in the last video, or what it even was, so I figured why not talk about it today. The adult theory was made by Pop Goes on Reddit before Five Nights at Freddy's sister location came out. It drew speculation from teasers and trailers at the time, but even after the game came out, there was new evidence used for this theory. The reason it was called the adult theory is because it proposes that the sister location animatronics were aimed at adults instead of kids. Let's cover the rest of the evidence, but I think you can imagine what I mean by this. This theory is terrible, and you'll see why when we cover the counter evidence, so just keep that in mind for later. The theory starts with the sister location being far different in its purpose than other diners. Typically, a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria would be aimed at family and kids. In the real world, think of like Chuck E. Cheese, for instance. The animatronics are designed to look family friendly and approachable, very different than the ones in sister location, according to this theory. However, the sister location is not designed for family fun. Instead, it's more of an underground club. Details like there being an elevator as an entrance and how the building is designed point to this. There are exposed wires, weird lighting, and machines that would make it dangerous for children. There are floor-level ventilation shafts, and despite there being Freddy Fazbear stuff and posters around, it's obviously not meant for kids to be wandering around. People assume that the area where sister location takes place is underground due to the phrase deep below ground used in the trailer. Now, the reasoning for this changes depending on the theory or timeline, but in this theory, it's implied that it's more of an adult location because it's meant to be hidden, therefore taking place in some kind of bunker almost. Pop Goes says it's either hidden inside a pizzeria with a secret entrance or an actual adult themed location, but because there's an elevator, it's likely the first option. I'll cover all the counter arguments at the end of the video, so keep this in mind, but now let's cover this theory's strongest piece of evidence, which revolves around the animatronics themselves. And this is the point of no return for the theory, probably the wildest pieces of evidence I've ever seen in a FNAF theory. I'm trying my absolute best not to get demonetized by YouTube, which probably explains my serious or nervous voice right now. So if you want me to cover more disturbing FNAF lore or theories, subscribing would be really helpful, and you can also now join the channel and become a member for shoutouts and videos. Sister Location introduced brand new animatronics, which on the surface makes sense. Each game has their own unique characters, often going with the theme of the location. This theory even uses the name of them as evidence, but the main subject of evidence is Ballora's design. This theory claims that because of its design, it's meant for adults. That and the way it dances and keeps its eyes closed, which is kind of disgusting. Ballerinas typically wear more than what Ballora wears, and Pop Goes uses this as proof that something else is going on. Though the theory does concede that Funtime Foxy and Funtime Freddy's design aren't as adult themed. Foxy and Freddy are pretty standard for FNAF designs, but I have to mention the way that this was mentioned in the actual theory. By the way, I'm going off of what I think is Popgoes' actual written out theory, which is linked in the description. Popgoes did create the theory, but this was someone else's blog post, which I'm not 100% sure if it was copy-pasted or not. It does look like it is, though. Regardless, the author added that while Foxy and Freddy's Funtime designs aren't explicitly adult-themed, the name Funtime still, quote, sounds dodgy. Which, I know I'm going to debunk this later in the video, but come on, I think you are definitely projecting if you see that name in a certain light. Given that the context is that the animatronics are meant for family entertainment in pizzeria locations. The naming thing doesn't stop there though, because notably I haven't mentioned the other animatronic in the game being Baby. I'm going to screenshot this explanation and put it up for the video from the actual post, but I'll just paraphrase this real quick. This is so dumb. The theory says that Baby is an odd name to call an animatronic that can walk and talk, and that there's an ulterior motive behind the name for this character, which, like, no. This is the definition of reaching. Speaking of reaching, the theory also cites the phrases used in the trailer and game, which are the following. Quote, "Don't hold it against us. You don't know what we've been through. Please stay in your seats. The show is about to begin. Deep below ground. Secrets don't keep. And there's a little of me in everybody." Keep this in mind for the debunking. Also, a little warning for the content if you do read the theory that is linked in the description. But if you do read it, you might notice that the way this evidence is presented is very condescending. It's a little funny, but the reason I'm mentioning this is to start transitioning into debunking this theory as canon. Being that the author strongly claims that Scott Cawthon, the maker of Five Nights at Freddy's, would go there with the games. And by go there, I mean like actually make a game with this in mind. Because no, he absolutely would not. He has said in the past that any adult themes related to what this theory implies has no place in the FNAF universe, because he doesn't feel comfortable with it. And this was one of the few times where he had to shut down a theory himself, saying he had to, quote, step in Daco's interview. If you know FNAF lore, you know how hard it is to get confirmation from Scott on anything. Historically, he even has a weird definition of retcon. This makes the author's crash out at the end of the theory really funny. They kind of rant at you saying, are you that... Okay, hold on. The author says, quote, "Are you that naive to dismiss a theory with evidence because you don't think a game developer would mention something like this?" End quote. It's worth mentioning that Popgoes had been teasing this theory before they released it and talking to numerous people about it, receiving hate and people shutting them down. By the way, do not send hate to Popgoes. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to talk about and debunk a disturbing piece of FNAF theory history. Going back to how they wrote it though, it's possible that this was written as a response to people shutting down the theory, and if you keep that in mind while reading it, it makes it a bit more interesting. There are many points where it feels like a rant, and it feels very rude to the reader and critics. This kind of makes the theory feel like one of those overly edgy theories that other games or movies or shows have. Like the last video where we covered how dream theories are almost always present in media. The same thing is true for adult interpretations. Except in this case, there is more than just one piece of evidence, and there was enough to get the game's dev involved. And with that, let's start debunking the theory. Let's get the phrases out of the way. I feel like they're the weakest piece of evidence. I couldn't find all the uses of the phrases. I found most of them in the trailer. I don't know where he got a few of the other ones from. It might have been from the actual game. But those phrases were cherry-picked. There was a few more that were used in the trailer that obviously didn't have those implications. And even then, you would have to very strongly be stretching this and forcing those phrases to work. So it very clearly doesn't imply what the author is implying. You can't just cherry pick stuff to make it work either. As for the sister location itself, it has a bit of a sketchy design, but saying it isn't meant for kids because of unsafe stuff like exposed wires and shaky machinery isn't proof of it being for adults. These things would make it unsafe for anyone to go down there, even adults, which might lead to injuries and the location getting sued. So it's not in their best interest to have this stuff out there. Obviously it's run down, so presumably it didn't used to be like this, meaning it probably didn't have all the wires everywhere. This just makes the evidence kind of a moot point as a result. As for the animatronic designs, Bellora's design is a bit strange, but because Foxy and Freddy don't follow the themes that this theory proposes, it can be excused. It would make their designs feel inconsistent with that purpose. Baby having that name really isn't all that strange. It was confirmed in the minigames to be designed for kids and being approachable, so it could scoop them up. But having childish names for mascots and characters geared towards kids is nothing new. This theory is trying to force a perspective on perceiving these designs and making it fit unnaturally. And the resulting inconsistencies leave plot holes that tear this theory apart. Now, for probably my favorite part when reviewing FNAF theories, the narrative. Oftentimes, theories use different pieces of clues and lore, and while it could be accurate or even match up perfectly, it doesn't guarantee a good story. So does this theory make a good story? No. See, the thing is, it is already part of a larger set of games with a narrative that, while missing a few pieces, we already have a decent picture of. Bare bones basics, FNAF is about a man who got away with the death of children and hid them inside animatronics. The children then possessed the animatronics and would then get their revenge on the man. This theory is way out there with the implications, and it hardly fits with the tone of the already established narrative, and does barely anything to serve as a plot, other than to add edginess for the sake of it. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is a diner meant for kids. You would get nothing out of it story-wise to make there be a sister location geared towards adults. There would have to be a strong narrative reason for that to be the case, to make a satisfying story. Even standalone, just looking at the game on its own, what's the purpose? This theory sucks. It gets 0 Freddy Fazbears. Stories are subjective, so let me know what you think in the comments. If you do want me to cover some more disturbing Finance of Freddy's lore or theories, you're gonna have to subscribe because this video definitely got demonetized. And if you want to be shouted out at the end of the videos, become a channel member. This might be a limited time thing. If too many people join, I don't want to have half the video being shoutouts, but maybe I'm just being overly optimistic. We'll see. Thank you so much for watching the video, and as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.